Wow. 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 Wow.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. That beeping sound is my alarm that I should start. Wait, let me make sure I got everything set up before we go. And happy Sunday, everyone. Um, just shout out to my wife in the background. If you hear anything, that's her. Um, so hey, thanks for joining in. So we're gonna continue our discussion with the Microsoft Excel 101. So yesterday we had sorry. So yesterday we had what we call this Excel basics. So that's pretty much the basics of Excel, what it's about, and pretty much about formatting and everything. So just the basics of Excel. So now today we're gonna dive into something a little bit complicated. And I say a little bit because this is just I'm not gonna be going into the super details yet of how to get some stuff done, but we're gonna be talking about formulas, how to start with one, how to come up with just the basic formulas for now. Now I know I've committed to where was that? Looking for my list. Hey, Kuya, shut up. Shout out to Earl Evan. Hey, so I know I've committed. So we got this Excel basics yesterday. We've covered everything. Oops, sorry, my sound is a little loud. Let me just Okay, so man, let me just wear my microphone properly. Okay, so we've talked about Excel basics yesterday. These ones, the ones that I'm highlighting right now. I know I've committed to include all of these ones today, but I may have to skip some to be specific. Just to give you a heads up, I'll be skipping um, statistical functions. I'll include that on the third day. I'm gonna skip count and rounding, so I'm gonna include that on the third day. I'm gonna exclude left, pretty much these ones that I'm highlighting. So I'm gonna exclude this one. Um, but I'm gonna cover these and VLOOKUP because a lot of people are asking about VLOOKUP. Oh, I will have to skip the index one. Sorry. Wasn't able to. If you've seen my post earlier today, so I wasn't able to finish everything in time, and I totally forgot I wasn't able to finish it like way back because I built the presentation like 3 years ago, and I totally forgot I wasn't able to finish it. Anyways, I got everything done, so let's go. So we're gonna talk about MS Excel 101, Excel formulas and functions. So our objective for today is to understand the basic formulas in MS Excel, understand Excel math and Excel functions. Just wanna check. Is everyone able to hear me? Cool. I got no contest whatsoever, so I'm guessing everyone is able to hear me. Are you? Let me check. Cool, so we're all good. All right. Let's start. So, this is our course guide. So we'll start with we'll start with Excel formula basics, Excel math, quickly sum columns, rows of numbers in Excel, Excel's date functions, text functions, and Excel lookup. Hey guys, thank you. Yes, awesome. Hey, thanks, Mag. Okay. Oh, good. Mag is here. So if you see Joseph Patrawago in the chat, he's one of what we call this, the Excel gurus that I know. So say hi to him. All right. So awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. So, all right. So we'll start. So Excel formula basics. So working with your formula and data. So before you start with anything in Excel formula, you need to be mindful of these three things. Well, at least this one. So the most notable difference being that in Excel, formulas start with the equal sign. So rather than ending it with an equal, like what we do in math, like what we do in math. So Excel formulas looks like this. So equals, and then 3 plus 2, instead of 3 plus 2, and then equals. So entering the formula. So it is usually best to first enter all of the data into the worksheet, meaning you need to make sure you have your data first before coming up with your formula. Like, what do I call this? You need to make sure you have your numbers, you have the names and stuff, like everything that you'd like to calculate before coming up with any formula. Because it's going to be challenging once you have your formula and you decided to add in or whatnot. But then again, it's still doable once you know the basics. So, but then again, ideally, it is best to enter all of your data first before starting your formula. So, and another thing that we've discussed about yesterday is cell referencing. So if you can remember, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing the regular PowerPoint presentation like going in full screen because I'm using just my main monitor and just going alt tab between Excel and PowerPoint. So it's best to have it this way. Anyways, going back. So, if you can remember cell referencing, so very important when you do your formula. cell referencing, like adding the dollar sign to make it absolute, or removing it so you move your formula as you go along. So I'll go into the details of that once we go with the formulas. So there are three ways in pointing your cell reference. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Okay, so there are three ways. One is cell referencing, or using your keyboard. The second one is using your mouse pointer. The third one, and not a lot of people knows this, moving the cell reference highlight. So what does that mean? In your Excel, there's a green rectangular highlight that you will see in each cell. So how does that look like? Here, so let's go to one of my Excel files here. Okay, so notice that you see that black slash dark green highlight in there. So when you do your formula, you can move that once you start making changes to your formulas. So for example, my formula here. Nope, I don't have my formula here. Sorry. Give me one that has a formula. Okay, here. So notice there are highlights here. There's a red, there's a blue. So you can move this one. If you notice here in my formula bar, it also changes if I move that little rectangular item in there. So we'll go along with how the formula works by doing that. Cool. All right. So that's cell referencing, your mouse pointer, and cell reference highlight. Next, so Excel math. What? What do you mean math? So yes, math exists in Excel. It's basically but it's basically built to help with math, mathematical problems and all that. So I mean, don't quote me on that, but that's one thing that I know. That what do you call this? One of the best use of Excel is math. So yes, there is math in Excel, and as we know, there are there are four operators, mathematical operators, and order of operations. That is in math that we're gonna be using Excel. So there's the minus sign, the plus sign, division, and multiplication. And multiplication in this case is asterisk. So yep, the sign in your keyboard. Cool. So since there's math, if you can remember in math, there's what we call MDAS, right? So in Excel, we have this order of operation. So when you do your formula, it's not MDAS this time, it's BEDMAS. So how that works, so if more than one operator is used in a formula, there's a specific order, which is BEDMAS. So we'll start with brackets. Brackets is your, like, the half square, and then exponents, and then your division. So exponents are these ones, and then your division, your multiplication, addition, and subtraction. So this is an example of a complex formula, and this is where your BEDMAS will apply. So be mindful of that when you're doing your formula. Okay, so yeah, so quickly sum your columns or rows of numbers in Excel. So we're now starting with the juicy part. So let's start with sum. I know a lot of people knows this, but I'm gonna share some things that some people might not know. So we'll start with sum. So sum function. So this is the syntax for the sum function, which is sum, sum. So there are the formula of that is that, and then open and close parentheses. So basically, it will sum up whatever is inside the that area. So number one is required when you are creating your sum. So what does that mean? And the rest, the number two, three, four, five are um, what I call this optional. So what does that mean? So when you create, let me go to one of my files. Uh, okay, so I have these two numbers here. So when you create a formula, of course you start with an equal sign, and then in this case our examples sum. So it's type sum. As you type along your formula, you will see suggestions based on the what I call this, based on the the characters that you've typed. So in this case, we'll use sum, and it will also show what's the purpose of that. So in this case, it adds the number of on a range of cells. So when you add your this one, it will show you number one. So number one in this case is pretty important when you are starting your formula. Um, Most of the time, the first item after your open, for instance, is important. So in this case, number one. Number one in this case will have 5, and then if you drag 5 and 15 in our example, we are adding 5 and 15. So, and they are still number one in this case. If we will close that to get the sum of 5 and 15, it will give us 20, right? Now, if you so if you can remember, it says here numbers 2, 3, and so on and so forth is optional. That is because aside from number 1, if you will add a comma after, meaning number 2, you can choose another cell to add to your sum. In this case, we're gonna add 75, or yeah, okay, I have the 75 here. I'm gonna use this one. Okay, so I have a 75, so that's a number 2. What it does, it basically adds C2 and C3, which is this, and then your B7, which is 75. What if it's located in another number? Then, I'm sorry, in another cell. So say I have 100 in here. I'd like to know what is 5 plus 15 plus this 100. So you can either type J3, do that, or as what I've mentioned earlier, you can move this little rectangular highlighter here. I don't know what it's called, sorry. So you can move that there, and you have your sum. So you can do it either way. So you can, instead of doing so this what I call this column that you see here is only applicable if your data is what I call this beside each other. If your data is separated and located in different cell, for example, you have your okay, I have apple, that's 10 units. I have my orange in this part, and I have 20 units in that one, and I have grapes in here, 30 units in that one. Now, if you'd like to get the sum of these 3, you cannot do a colon because they are separated. So what you do, you can either do, you can click that J3, and then comma 20, comma 30. All right. So you can do that and then close it, press enter. You have your sum, or you can also do it this way. Instead of hitting comma, you can click that, press control, click that, while still holding control on your keyboard, do that. It will automatically add a comma, hit enter. In most Excel, in the latest Excel version, it will automatically um, close the formula. Cool. So that is for sum. Now there's another way to sum your numbers. It's what you call auto sum. So there are two shortcut keys on yeah, two shortcuts for using Excel sum. So basically there are two ways to sum in Excel. So one is the sum formula, the second one is auto sum. So where can you see that? So yep, so auto sum is located in your home and then auto sum and then or formulas and then auto sum. So where is that one? So you have your numbers here. I'd like to get the sum of all of these. You have your home and then your auto sum here. This one, this icon that you see here. If you click that, it will automatically sum that. So that's another way of doing it. But in this case, we're gonna do, and most of the time, I prefer using formula rather than this function because I can play with where I would want to place it. Cool. Okay. So, so aside from the two formula and the auto sum, there's also a taskbar. Yes, if you can remember taskbar. So this part here says ready and all that. If you highlight your numbers, your taskbar will also show the most common what do you call this most common formula in Excel. So we have average, so meaning average of all these four. You have your count and your sum of all these four that I've highlighted. So it also works this way. Does it? Yep, it does. So meaning if you're gonna do control, so say if I'm gonna highlight 75 plus 75 here, it will give me the sum. So basically your taskbar will give you your sum as well, if you just need it for a quick sum. So here, you can do it that way. All right. So some important notes, and again, same thing as yesterday. I'm gonna give you a copy of these this presentation pack. So to sum a column of numbers, select the cell immediately. So that's what we did in the taskbar. Another important thing, so once you create a formula, you can copy it to the other cells. And this is a magic of Excel. You can copy it to the other cells instead of typing it. For example, if you copy a formula in cell B to cell C, the formula in C7 automatically adjusts. Now, how does that work? So I have, oops, I'm gonna put it somewhere here. So I have equals sum of 5 and 15. And because I didn't lock this, I didn't make it absolute. If I copy this formula to this part, it will automatically sum C3 and C4 because I didn't lock it. So basically, as you move it downwards, it will give you a sum of the same column because you drag it going down. If you move it to the right, of course, it will give you an error unless you have a number here, then it will sum it up. But basically, whichever area you move it, as long as there's a value in there, then it will also calculate as you go. What if I'm gonna lock C2 but keep C3? What's gonna happen? I'll do that. Alright, so it still sums it up, but this time it's only gonna sum it locks your first, what do you call this? It locks your first item in its position, and when you drag it, it automatically sums whatever is on top of that. So here, right? So it's summing up everything because you lock the first one to up to C6. So depending on how you want to do it, you can play with your dollar sign, which is your absolute, and in that way, um, it would be easier for you to get your numbers. And be mindful of this dollar sign because if you miss something, if you miss a dollar sign or your absolute um or your cell lock, basically, if you miss that, it might not give you the accurate result. Right, next we have Excel's date function. So if you can remember yesterday, we've talked about how to add a date, right? Your control and then your semicolon. Like it automatically adds a date, right? So Excel has functions that you can use instead of doing that static auto formula, what I call this, auto function. So let's start first with calculating your number of days. So how do you do that? Here. So in this case, we'll have your the difference between January 1, 2017 to June 15, 2017. That will give you 165 days. So that's one example of playing with your Excel operations. So if the result looks like a date instead of a number, change the cell number to general. Like say this one. Here. Because in some cases, your cells might have been formatted to might have been formatted already, but your goal is to get the number of the difference of the 2 days, right? So play with your formatting here to get your difference of these two numbers. So choose general, and that will give you the difference of the 2 days. Cool. All right, so if you subtract the later date from the earlier date, the result will be a negative number, and Excel cannot display this result. Hence, this number signs in there because that's an error. All right, next. So get the current date. So instead of using control semicolon, you can instead use equals today, and that will give you today's date. So how does that work? Here, if you use the day formula, it will give you that date. And the static date sample here is February 27. If you use today equals today, then you'll have that result. For example, you have your let's say you have your load date here of your data, and then you use today. When you enter that, it will give you today's date. And then when you want to use it for future file but keep this load date here, make sure you paste it as values. Why? Because if it's gonna be tomorrow, and if you're gonna open this file tomorrow, this March 29 here will change to March 30. So make sure when you have a formula to today, base it as values. Where's that? Values. Here. Base it as values, so it will remove the formula. Now, what are the other paste functions that you have here? So you have your formula, you have your transpose. So remember yesterday, I didn't use formula as an example
That's because this function, or sorry, this base this base function basically copies whatever formula that you have here. So remember our sum here. Instead of typing sum again in here, you can instead just copy and then right click paste formula, or right click F. Oops. What? Yeah. Right. So instead of just typing, you can just copy your formula. Right click, paste, and then paste formula. Now, why is it giving a 0? That is because if you notice your if you notice your formula bar, it's now highlighting K7 and 8. That is because you didn't lock it. Now, what if we will lock the formula? If you copy that, paste as formula, here, it's still referencing to that number. So if you drag that, drag all your formulas here, right? So all of these are getting the sum of that. What if these are, what I call this? If you'd like to move it that way, then you can just remove that, there. So that's for your um formulas. And again, today is your getting your current date in Excel. Next, so getting the year, month, week, or day number. So Excel has a way to get your year, your month only, or your week number only. Week number normally applies to in a workplace. You'd like to get the number of weeks from your calendar, and then you have your day. So how does that work? Okay, so in this date that you have here, today's date, if you say equal to A2 for year formula, it will only give you 2020. That one. For month, that's for the date, and week number. So meaning March 29, 2020 is part of week 14 of 2020. Okay, that is for your week, month, date. Right, so apart from that, you also have your days. I mean, not day number. Why is it day number? This is day name. I'm sorry. So this part is your day name. So what does that do? Oops. Sorry. I accidentally pressed F1. Okay. So what does that do? It will convert whatever data is in your A2 to either a month name, a long and a short version, and a weekday name, or a weekday name and a short and a long version. So what if your birthday is 3107 1988? Okay. If you're wondering why it's that way, I'm using the Australian format. If you're wondering, so if assuming your birthday is July 31st, 1988, and you would want to know what date was that? I mean, what day? Yeah, what day is that? You can use text. So based on example here, text, you click on that, and then comma, and then so example, you have your short and your long. So your short is DDD. That will give you Sunday. So this date is a Sunday. If you'll change it to, oops, it's gonna be Saturday because it's a blank. All right. If we put 4D as a base on our example, it will give you the full one. Month is same thing, comma, MMM. That should give us July. Yep. If we're gonna lock it, I'm gonna copy the formula here. And I'm gonna change this to 4Ms. It will give you the full July. So that is for your getting the month, week, day name. Next, we have getting the end of the month or the start of the month. So, this is pretty helpful, especially in a place where you'd like to know what I call this. If you work with a formula that requires you counting the number of months, then this is important. So you have your last day of the previous month. So February will give you 29 in this example. So you have that formula. First day of the selected month. So if you have your date here in B2, if you choose that, and you'd want to know the first day of that one, then it will give you this value. Last day of the selected month, that one. Last day of selected month of the previous year, that is here. So your formulas are here. So if you want to combine the end of month function with today, meaning in this example, you're gonna get the first day of today, assuming you really don't know what's the first day of today, then use this formula. End of month, and then you put today inside it. Right? So you can put formulas inside formulas to get the what call this, to get the result that you need, depending on what you are after. Okay, next. So weekday number. So what is this one for? So this is to get the weekday number for a date. So for example, here in our sample image. So what is weekday of this date? It will give us 1 because Sunday starts with 1. Well, sorry, our Excel formula weekday uses 1 as a Sunday, and then 2, 3, 4. All right. So weekday return type. So there is an optional second argument for the weekday function, so which is the return type. So when you type your weekday formula, serial number is where your date is located. In this case, B4. That is your serial number. And then return type, what is that for? So if this argument is omitted, the default return type of 1 is used with the weekdays numbered from Sunday to Saturday. So you can play with the return type. Instead of giving you a 1 to 7, so from Sunday to Saturday, you can change the return type to change the result. So say for example, in your workplace, in hours, for example, we started at our work week starts with a Saturday. So we instead change, in my formulas, I use Saturday to Friday when I do a weekday formula. So I use this one on my on my formulas. So depending on you, how you'd like to use that, then just play with it, and just let me know if you have questions. Right, and again, this is a good example of using the weekday formula, getting your weekday. Week start date. I normally use week ending, but in this case, if you'd like to know what's the start of what part of week start is your date, then you can use this formula. So in this case, this formula that I'm highlighting here will calculate Sunday as the start of the date, meaning in our example, we have this Sunday. So these dates is part of the week of this one. So let's try to apply that in a real word. So let's say I have Saturday 21/02/2020, and then I have 01 no 10/1/2020, and I have 15/03/2020. Okay, I would like to know what's the start, what part of the week start of the year are these three dates. So week start, and assuming our week starts on a Sunday, so let's use this formula. I'm gonna copy this formula because I'm too lazy to type. I'm gonna put that here, equals, but it's trying to get this A2, which doesn't have any dates. So our dates are in here in column I. So what I'm gonna do, can either type I12, then that will give you week start of the start of the week of this date is 1602. You can also use with my formula. Oops, sorry. The formula here. I'm gonna move the highlight. All right. So 1001. Sorry, January 10 is part of January 5 week start. Let's try to confirm with our calendar. Well, but first I'm gonna copy that one. Okay. So meaning these are the Sundays. These are the start of the week of these dates. Let's try to confirm. Let's go to calendar. Let's look for February 21. February 21. Up. It's a Friday. And it's part of week ending week start 16. If you look at your dates here, that's why. Okay, is it? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, it's showing. All right. So if you look at 21 February here, it's part of week start 16. So our Sunday to Saturday here, Sunday is 16, so week start 16. Let's look for January 10. January 10 here. So it's part of January 5 week start. So here. Amazing, right? Amazing what Excel can do. Cool. Next. So Excel logical functions. Now this is one of the juicy part of Excel. So logical functions. So what does this do? All right. So there's this function that we call if in your Excel. What this does, so Excel if function adds decision making to Excel spreadsheets by testing a specified condition to see if it's true or false. If the condition is true, the function will carry out one action. If it's false, then it will do a different thing. Please note there are other alternative ways instead of using if, depending on the scenario. So for example, converting grades, instead of using if, use instead VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP for interest rate, and specific value instead of an error in result, then use if error. We'll go through if error and VLOOKUP later. But for the basic if function, so there are three parts of it. So logical test, meaning this is your scenario. The second one is if your scenario is true. If your argument is true, then it will give you this result. If not, then it will give you this result. All right. For example, So what if our example is in E7? This is where you want your result to be. So this example, the total in cell E7 should only show an amount if the quantity has been entered in D7. So there are three parts of the arguments for this if the function, to the if function for this example. So first, it will test if D7 to see if it is empty. So our formula here. So this is your scenario, and going back, let me go back. Your comma will separate your if formula. So meaning the first one is your logical test. So in our example here, you have your if D7 is, if you see this two what do you call this, quotation sign, if you see that, that means it's blank. So meaning if D7 is equal to blank, then your result should be blank. If not, then what is your product of C7 and D7? Meaning it will give you 15 times 10. That should be the result that we're after. So in this example, if D7 is equal to blank, then blank. If not, that. So D7 in this example is blank, then it gave a blank result because it's true. That is a blank. In this example, D7 has a number 10, then and because it's not blank, then it will give you your the product of C7 and D7, which in this case false. So again, going back, is D7 blank? Is it in this case? Yes, then blank here. It will stop the calculation. But because it's not blank in this example, then it proceeded with false. Cool. Next, a little complicated, but there's what we call nested if function. So in this case, you can nest one or more if functions within another if function. So to create more options in the result, meaning here's your example. Let me go directly to the example. So meaning if your first scenario is, in this case, if the price, and by the way, if you're wondering why it says here price instead of what I call this, instead of a cell reference, it should supposedly be C7, right? But because it's not, because we're using name range in this case, meaning it will automatically calculate everything that's in that column. But let's just assume, I'm not gonna assume, let me open my file. I have my if here. Okay, all right, so this is the nested if. In this case, because this table that you are seeing here, because this one here, this column is named as price, it will use, it uses this formula. But but most of the time, and most of the people that I know, instead of using naming because it's quite complicated, we'll go ahead and just use the cell reference instead. So in this example, if C7 is equal to blank, then your result in your total should be blank. If not, it will instead use this formula, which is another if, which is our first example earlier. So this is our first example. So another if inside an if. So meaning, is it blank? then it's blank. Now in this case, is C9 blank? No. Then it will calculate whatever is in there. So you can, that's what you call nesting inside an if formula. I know it's quite complicated when using multiple when using nested if. So I suggest before you go using nested if, familiarize yourself first with if formula before you go ahead and use nested if. So might as well use another if beside that and then just sum it up right after. But again, depending on you. Once you're already familiar with it, then go ahead and play with nested if. All right. So very important when using a nested if. So there's an order for that when using what I call this, a nested if. Make sure you use the harder test first. For example, in this following formula, there are two tests. So if B2 is greater than or equal to 20,000, right? So if the amount in cell B2 is 25,000, the result would be good because it is greater than 20,000. If you will have it as the easier test first, oops. If the amount in B2 is 25,000, the result of the formula would be average because the results of that first test is true. So very important when you do your nested if, start it with the harder test first, or your logic should be that way. Next, text functions. All right. So what is a text function? So there are multiple text functions in Excel. In my discussion guide that I gave the other day, so we have combining, we have your left, you have your right, mid, and all that. Then again, I won't be able to discuss these things today. Instead, I'm gonna move it to next week together with pivot and charts. So we'll cover the combining text data in Excel in this one. So combining text from multiple cells. So in this case, I'm not sure if you can remember yesterday, I tried to combine a first and last name, right? So to combine text from multiple cells, I know there's a concatenate that some people know, but using an ampersand or your and operator is way better because you don't have to type it. It's shorter to type. So to combine two cells, you can there are two views. If your table is formatted, meaning, let me go to my sample. All right. So if it's formatted now, and how do you format your table? That's here. Meaning, so if it's formatted, when you combine your cell A2 and B2, it will show this. So for example, equals, if you click that, ampersand that, this will be the formula. But if your table is not formatted, then it will just, when you type equals that, ampersand that, then it will give you A2 and B2 in your formula bar. Next, because when you combine because when you combine two cells, it will automatically have it as, of course, combining, meaning joining it together. If you're gonna use it for cases like a first and last name, you can add a space between your last and first name. So in this case, so when you automatically just combine it, that is the result, right? But if you'd like it to have a last name, comma, space, first name, then your formula would be that ampersand code. Now, what is this for? Everything that is between, do that. All right. Everything that is between that will be added in your combination. That, for example, you'd like to add a nickname. So you'll have, okay, let's have cool guy. All right. So meaning when you combine it, you have your A3, which is the last name. This is something that you came up and you'd like to add it in there. And you'd like to have a space in between. And then the first name. So when you input that, then it will give you Jones, cool guy, Ben. Right? So anything that is between the the quotation mark is up to you. Whatever you'd like to be, whatever you like to place in there. So that's for combining text. Next, adding a line break. Now, this is an example you can use if you'd like your if you'd like to have your view wrapped. So what's wrapping is this one, right? That way. If you'd like to combine it like adding a wrap and having the data below the other cell, then use char 10 or character 10. If you'll do that, so based on our example here, it will give you Cam Hill, meaning first character 10, last name Hill, then that's the result. And I don't see any purpose of that, but just in case you'd like to do it that way. Right, next. Combining cells with text and a number. What? You can do that? Right. So in this case, you can, as what I've talked about earlier, anything between your quotation marks can be something that you can use, or can be something that you'd like to, or is something that you would like to add in your value. So in this case, if your column B, you'd like to have it as, in your column A, you have a calculation of the number of days left until it's due. And in your column B, you just add in equals and then your due in, and then A3 meaning how many days, which is 60. Then you add your days. That will give you due in 60 days, like in this example here. Oops. Go to that. All right. So combining cells with text and a number. So you can do that as well. Next, combining text and, oops, where's my example here? I lost my example here. I'm gonna add it later. But combining text with a formatted date. In this case, if your formula is today, meaning what date is today, then it will give you this A2 value. Now, because if you can remember on our example earlier of coming up or getting your day name in Excel, you can just type DDDD, right? So what if I'll copy this formula, paste it in Excel? Oh, I have it here. All right. So what if I'll have that formula in here? you type in today, this is without formatting. If you add text, as our example earlier, and then DDDD, it will give you today's Sunday. This is in month, date, year format. Year, month, date without any dashes. And this is complete date, complete year, a short day rather, complete month, complete date, and complete year. Then it gives you Sunday. So today is Sunday, March 29, 2020. So instead of typing that, right? So instead of typing that, you can just input a formula, right? So what if we will say, what is February 4, 2020? So what is February 4, 2020? I'm going to remove today. I'm going to change it to E6, which is our date. Enter that. So February 4, 2020 is a Tuesday. All right. Next. All right. So combining your text and formatted numbers. So this is where you apply it in a real world scenario. So you can use something like this. You can format your result in column A as a what I call this as a number format, which is this way, or sorry, currency format, which is this way. It will give you this value, this result. As a percentage, it will give you this, sorry, this. And then as a fraction, then this one. All right. Cool. Next, your coffee break. All right. Because that discussion is quite long, so that's why I have a coffee break in here. Anyways, so that's it for text functions. Then again, I'm gonna have other text functions, which are these: the left, the right, the mid, the proper. So what are they? If you'd like to learn it yourself, you can Google it, but I can discuss it as well next week. These are the other text functions. For now, we'll proceed to VLOOKUP. So, lookup and reference functions. In this example, I'm gonna skip index match, but just focus on VLOOKUP for now, right? And again, index match, I'll have it next week. And what is that one for? I'll give you a quick overview of that later. But what is VLOOKUP? So VLOOKUP stands for the vertical lookup. So it's a function that makes Excel search for a certain value in a column, or what they call a table array, or a table, in order to return a value from a different column in the same row. All right. So there are four arguments in a VLOOKUP. First is your lookup value, or this is your basis. So what value do you want to look up? So in this example, we're looking for whatever is in A7. Your table array is your table. Column index is which column is it, which column number it is, your result rather. And then your range lookup. So do you want an exact match or an approximate match? So if you use true or 0, or omit the last argument, so if you remove the last argument, an approximate match will be returned. Sorry, yeah, so this example has false as the last argument, meaning we want to know what's the exact value. So, great. So VLOOKUP formula for range values will We'll get to that in a bit. So in some situations, an approximate match is preferred, so several values will return on the same result. All right, let's go first with VLOOKUP. Let me remove my grid lines. If you can remember to make sure um these lines are such an eyesore. So I normally remove my grid lines for my files. All right. So in this case, what we're doing is we're looking for the exact match of A27. So when you do your VLOOKUP, your first argument is your lookup value. So when you type in VLOOKUP, first argument is your lookup value, meaning what is in your A7. So your A7, so please don't confuse yourselves with naming in here. So your A7 is whatever data is in your A7 cell. In this case, what is in A7 cell is A27. So where is A27 here? This one, right? And then your next is your table array. Most of the time, when you're doing a VLOOKUP, you would want to lock all of your cells. Why is that? Because if you're not gonna lock it and you're gonna look for another result, let's put this here as an example. We'll look for B14. Okay. All right. So we are looking for B14. So where is B14? That's B14. This is our ideal result, right? 15. So we're looking for the price of B14, or in this case, we're looking for the price of A27. If you are not gonna lock this part, and you are going to copy your formula here, and in this part, you're looking for C45, right? If you're not gonna lock this, assuming I'm not gonna lock that, so I have that formula. So when you initially created your formula, it will still give you a result, right? But if you're gonna copy that here, it's still okay. Why? Because although your table moved, but your result is still part of where it's highlighting, right? What if you move it somewhere here? Right. Now it's now giving you an error because one, you didn't lock it. And because it's looking, it's now searching for somewhere that doesn't have any of the data. But if you're going to lock that, going to lock your table, and you have your C45 here, you'd like the result somewhere beside that, then it will lock your table. All right, so that's really important when you do your VLOOKUP. Make sure to lock unless you'd like your formula to move. All right, now approximate match. All right, so it's giving you a 5 in your result here because it's looking for an approximate match of that value. Where does this apply? What's the perfect scenario to use an approximate match? On a report card. Okay, so on a report card you have your scores, right? On a grading list, you have your, if it's 0 to 49.9, score is F. 50 to 59.9, score is D. So on and so forth. 85 to 1 million, 85 to 100, and that's A, right? On your report card, instead of using what do you call this? Instead of using an approx an exact match, rather, you use an approximate, which is 2. Now, my apologies. I must have I must have skipped how to create a VLOOKUP. So let's have, for example, 60, and then below that is 61. Okay. So when creating a VLOOKUP, you start with equals VLOOKUP. Your lookup value is 60. Your table array, and our data is on a different sheet. So you hit comma, you go to the sheet where your grades are. You can do it two ways. You can either highlight that or highlight the column. Most of the time on my files, I use column, mainly because my file works this way. Like, all of these parts are numbers, all of these parts are results. But if your data here, if your column has numbers here that you don't want to include on your formula, then that's where the locking formula applies. Because when you locked it, meaning when you don't want anything outside that lock to apply. So on our sample, we'll have, going back to VLOOKUP, comma, do that, because we're gonna look for anything, all of the scores, and then the result is, sorry, this is my table, and the result is what do I call this, 2. And why 2? This is 1, this is 2. If your result is somewhere here, we're gonna test it later, right? And then this one that you are seeing here, you can either type true, you can use type true, or you can type 1 or 0. So 1 for true, 0 for false. Most of the time, on my formulas, I use 1 0 instead of true false. Right? So when I do that, it gives me a C, right? Because 60 is a C. What if I have 61? Okay. So we're gonna look for B9. Everything that is in A and B, columns A and B, and then my result, the result that I'm looking for is in column 2, which is this. Then what I'm trying to look for is supposedly a C, right? Because I'm looking for 61, which is between 60 and 70. But because I chose an not approximate, but I chose an exact value, which is 0, then it's giving me an error. But if I'll use 1 or an approximate match, meaning you're looking for anything between 60 to 70, it will give you a C. All right. Let's choose another number, 49. Because we're using approximate match, then it gives us an F. So 49 is between 0 to 50. It's not D, because 49 is just between 0 to 49.9, or an F. What if my result here is, what I'm trying to look for is, say, I'm gonna name this still fruits. So apple, mango, orange. Orange is my favorite color, and my so I have A as orange, right? Say grapes, and then guava. Can't think of anything. So what if I'm instead of the grade, what if I'm gonna look for the favorite fruit of 61? So what I'm gonna do on my formula, if you can remember, we chose we did it this way, right? So column 1, column 2, column 3. All right? Notice, do you see this 3C at that one in there? That would guide you when you're doing your VLOOKUP. So ABC, right? So that's 3. And what we're after is the third result. So let go of your click, hit comma, and then you're looking for the third column, 3, and then you're looking for approximate match, then 1 or true, then your result is grapes. All right? What if your after is not fruit, but grade, but the same table, just change this to 2. It will give you your F result. All right? So, right. So, that's for VLOOKUP. Now, so for VLOOKUP, there you can combine if and VLOOKUP. So in this example, you have if you see an is an a in there, so that's just an example. Oops. Is an a is a formula. So is NA checks whether a value is an NA and returns a true or false. So this formula that you have here reads, if this VLOOKUP results to an error, which is NA. So if this VLOOKUP results to an error, then our result is blank because we don't want to see an NA error in there. So our result is blank. If it's not an error, then it will give you your VLOOKUP value. Now, this is not commonly used anymore because starting Excel 2007, right? So a new function which is if error was introduced. So instead of doing this long formula, you can just go with this. Now in our example earlier, remember when we didn't lock that? If I move that there, no, because it's blank. And we're using approximate. Okay, let's not use approximate, instead we use exact. Okay, I'm gonna use exact. So meaning this formula reads, look up whatever is in B8, which is 60, from your sheet. This one here, this one with the exclamation point. This is your sheet, grades sheet, and columns A to C in grades sheet, and the third column in your grade sheet, and the exact result of that. So it gives us grapes 60, right? Right. This is your grade sheet. This is your column C, the third column on that table, and this is your result. All right. So if we'll do that in there, it will give you okay, because there's data. Let me remove this just so to remove confusion. Right. If I copy this formula, move this to here, it will give me an NA. But what if I don't want to see NA? I want to keep this formula. Instead, I would want a result that would say, remember our if formula earlier? So it pretty much works the same way. So meaning this formula that I'm doing right now Meaning, if it is an error, meaning this formula, if this results to an error, then what is the value, comma. So what is the value if it is an error? Because this is an error, I want the result to say sayop imong formula. Alright. So because it's an error, it will give me sayop imong formula. Alright. So that's the purpose of using if error. So this is applicable in, and I would recommend on your formulas, when you do an Excel formula, I would recommend placing an if error, just so when you send the file, you will not see a result like that in your columns. We don't want to see that. You don't want your stakeholders to see NAs in their file. So instead of doing that, you can use if error and then blank, so that when you send it to someone, you still have your formula in there, but because the result is error, then it's showing you blank. Cool. All right, so that's it for today. All right, so that's it for today. I'm gonna share this file on our next topic next week. I'm gonna include the other text functions to the pivot charts and graphs. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people are looking for this part, the graphs and how to play with it. So excited to talk to you again next week. I'll see you guys next week. You guys stay safe, take care, stay home. You guys enjoy. Happy weekend. Take care, everyone.